for the record?
My name is Christopher Kuma,
And the 60 West Shoreline.
102 North Main Street, Ashley. I'd like to address the council, got an article read in the paper of an amendment to the rental ordinance where you want to shut down a property if there was either a drug or gun crime that occurred there or an arrest made there. I don't think it's a very good idea to be punishing the landlord for something that there's a very good chance he had no knowledge of. Obviously, if the landlord was involved with the crime and committed the crime, then yes, go ahead and punish him accordingly. But there's been many times I do own rental properties where I can rent to someone and not know of their activities. Let's say, for example, rent a property, an apartment to a woman. She moves in, she has a job, everything's fine. Boyfriend moves in with her. All of a sudden, police arrest him for selling drugs out of the apartment. How am I supposed to know that he was living there and that he was doing those things? And also my property gets shut down because of that. Also, what could happen is, not all landlords are rich that can afford to have all this money to pay taxes, bills, and everything else. A lot of people have a 9-to-5 job. Landlords, especially in this area, Northeast Pennsylvania, it's a lot of work to try and collect the rents, maintain the properties. It's not easy. That's our 9-to-5 job. And to take away a source of income, then we have trouble paying taxes. I'm actually looking at the August 22nd Luzerne County Tax Claim Bureau list. 8 pages of this are Wilkes Barre City properties. If you shut down a property for 6 months on a landlord here in the city, you may not have money to pay taxes, which means his property is going to be on that sale list. And just because it's on the list doesn't mean it gets sold, which is not going to hurt. You mentioned a couple of ideas before of doing things. It costs you money, and taking something off take a property from a landlord, shutting it down, he doesn't have any to pay taxes, which means you now don't have money for your budget, which affects you. The idea of having more code enforcement officers is a very good idea. I'm sure it's going to cost money to pay these inspectors. You need that from property taxes. One of the largest cities in the world, New York City, they had a big problem in the 70s and 80s, and they did a good job of cleaning up and getting rid of this problem with drugs. And an idea of shutting down landlord's property, never mentioned, never happened, nothing. What they did was they put more undercover detectives on the street doing buy and bust to get rid of the problem and not punishing the landlord or property owner. Do more of that. I see a lot of gangs also. Get an anti-gang squad for the police department and get rid of it that way. Just passing it on to a landlord saying, well, you're not supposed to rent the property or have it open if there's a crime happen. I don't think it's going to do anything. You know, just passing responsibility off to someone who, you know, an innocent person basically, someone who doesn't, you know, can't do anything, doesn't know how to do it. Put the responsibility on the police department, get them to do more, you know. Just shutting down property and taking away the income, it's not going to work. I think it's going to create more problems. Thank you.
So would you want to address the part about the questions that were raised about the notifications and property owners being aware?
One of the biggest issues that has come up is the issue of obviously due process for the landlords. As a combination of that, there was also concern about innocent families, innocent children that are displaced. The first thing is that unfortunately because of code issues, there's been situations where families have been displaced because of the landlords did not keep up their property or whatever issue. We've always worked with CEO and other places to make sure that these people are not left out in the cold. It's not that we're putting people on the street. Number two is that with regard to the actual treatment of the landlords and the owners, the occupants, is the reason that we set the ordinance language the way we did is because there has to be what they call an implied or actual knowledge of drug activity or of the gun activity. The due process is that you could have an immediate appeal to the housing board. You're setting up the names of the people that are on the housing board tonight as well to put the ordinance in the codification in January. The idea is here that we're trying to make sure that when a place is shut down, that we can guarantee that the owner did have knowledge of the information. If they did not, as Councilman George said, we're going to provide notice. If it happens again, there's an obligation that landlords have to take care of the properties like anybody else does here as well. And those of us who are homeowners here, that you have to take care of your property. Now, there's ample case law out there concerning places like Sherman Hills, places like regular double block homes and situations with regard to imputed knowledge of situations. So that's going to be our guide. And the issue was, and the directive was from the administration and from the people that were concerned about crime, that we have to get tough on crime, and that we drafted an ordinance that's going to be constitutionally accurate under the law, but it's also going to put a heavy burden on not only our cops in our city, but also on the landlords and the occupants. And that's why we drafted it that way. But I want to assure not only the public, but also city council in considering this, that this is not a means of hurting good landlords like this gentleman here, or the other ones like Mr. George said, that there's a lot of good landlords in the city. Our goal is to fight crime, and this is another tool that we can use to fight the crime. Please understand that I know that we're focusing a lot on the issue of the guns and the drugs issue, but there's also situations where we go into these homes and there are significant code problems. They intentionally rip out all of the wired smoke detectors. They don't have any type of heat. They're using space heaters. There's a lot of different things that can cause problems. All of that will be looked at. It's a cumulative inspection. So there's more to it than just the drugs and the guns, but this is just another tool that we're going to be able to use.
We could also, I know in conversations with the administration, if you are a property owner and you have concerns about your tenants, there's nothing stopping a property owner from giving the city a call and asking for assistance or a little guidance, or do I have a problem here or don't I have a problem here? And I think that'd be a very prudent thing to do, especially in view of this, so that you are a little proactive in who your tenants are. And if you feel that there are concerns, or that your tenant is paying his monthly rent in cash and has no visible means of, or you have somebody that's moved in or whatever it may be, give us a call, and we'll be more than happy to work with you. And there are ways of doing that as well.
This has to be a community effort. That's a very good point. Very good.
And what it is, I saw the same thing you did. You're going to be closed down for 6 months. But that's not the case. It's, which will be lesser of the time needed to cure the violating event. It's up to 6 months. So if you go in, we go in, and the police department have a raid, the health department and the clerk's office come, they can close down that building, get those tenants out. And if you're a good landlord, next day if you want to put more people in, you can do that. But if it happens two in a month, it'll probably be extended each time. My proposal is the first time, let them come back in. Second time, let them go for 6 months, because you're not what? I don't want to live next to a drug house. Nobody wants to live next to a drug house. We're at war. We're losing. We're outmanned, we're outgunned, and they don't have to follow any rules. So we have to have the tools to combat that. And if it's infringing on your rights a little bit, so be it. But the people next door to you, the people behind you, people in front of you, they don't want to live in that condition. And that's what we're concerned about.
Would you just go over the 6 months with a lesser?
Right, there are certain provisions in here where there's a lesser 6 month situation, and that is if there's a riot, which is defined in the Pennsylvania statute, if there's 3 or more code violations, like Mr. George said, if there's a disruptive conduct report, if there's another raid or a code violation, it would be a 6 month shutdown. If the common areas of the premises are shut down because of the code enforcement violations, failure to appoint a property manager, situations like that, where it gets into the essential mandatory 6 month situation is if there is the knowledge of the owner or the occupant, or the prior actual knowledge where there's situations where there has been a charge or a conviction in a court of competent jurisdiction of the narcotics and controlled substances as are defined in the property, the statute for Pennsylvania. Same thing with illegal or criminal action with a firearm that is illegal. And one also mentioned here, we're not confiscating firearms, it's not a Second Amendment issue. but those are defined as a little bit different, that shall require the closure for the rental user for a period of 6 months at the direction of the city of Wilkes Barre. And then, as Mr. George has said, each reopening without having cured the violation will be a new violation and subject to additional fines and penalties.